And most of the times, there's a lot of CSS written. And the first thing I do is I try to delete as much as possible. Today we're talking about coding custom designs.
Ooh.
This is a personal topic from Dominic, I'd say. And yet it isn't.
Yeah.
So I'm more the front-end developer. Dominic is more the back-end developer. But Dominic just told me that he's very curious about talking about this topic. Why is that?
Yes. Why is that? So it's actually an easy answer to the question, because we have had a couple of episodes now on Flint and what Flint does, and I think Flint has a lot of strength, right? So we want to make with our custom starter theme, we want to make development as easy and streamlined as possible for like creating custom designed websites or for custom websites, custom WordPress websites. Mm-hmm. And I did like a survey. It's not really a real survey, like with real rules or anything. But I talked to a couple of people. I asked around in our dev fixes and so on.
Not a scientific
because I wanted to
one.
know. Yes,
Okay.
A really scientific survey. Because I wanted to know what people spend most of the time doing actually when working on projects, right? And it was pretty clear that most of the time, actually, people spend writing CSS.
Okay.
So, and I want to find a solution for that. Like, why is that? What can be done? Like, CSS, the early versions of Flint, Flint is pretty old now in terms of web frameworks or starters, right? So we've been around for quite a while, and CSS has actually matured a lot, and also like especially dropping IE 11 support, like with JavaScript, but also with CSS has brought a lot of advantages. And while we do use a couple of new techniques in Flint as a starter, I'm just curious, what are the most challenges when coding custom designs, or the biggest challenges when coding custom designs, and what can we do in Flint to ensure that you have a good base for tackling all of these challenges and for solving them?
Mm-hmm.
And I do not have an answer for that yet. So I thought, Steffen, why don't you tell me what is always so challenging when coding custom designs?
Does anyone have an answer who's listening to this? Write it down in the comments before I talk about what I think others will say. Wait, 3, 2, 1. I think many people think the answer is Tailwind.
As a solution, you mean?
Is a solution.
Okay.
Because I think many people, I think the idea why Tailwind was started is, I think, because partly it's like, CSS is broken kind of in terms of why do you write so much stuff again and again, and it's so hard, and things are conflicting and so on. And I can understand that to some extent. And I think that's from my point of view, it's more difficult to answer, of course. It's like you can have different approaches. It depends on what you want to achieve. I think when you want to have a custom design, the quickest solution certainly is using pre-existing things, right? And just customizing them. You just don't get 100% of what you want typically. Like when using an existing theme, and may that be a WordPress theme, or it can be pre-coded a theme, any other theme, HTML theme, that would be very quick. But you probably only get to a certain point in terms of customization until you start breaking things again. And that has been my experience also with a lot of frameworks. Like when we used Bootstrap, it's great because it gives you a head start and you can do a lot of stuff very quickly in terms of doing grid stuff and so on, and some UI stuff. But what I always really didn't like was when I wanted to customize something beyond the standard and I had to overwrite a lot of stuff. I just don't like overwriting because it feels like I'm wasting resources in terms of having duplicate code that just overwrites something. I think technology has gotten a lot smarter these days where it can be even detected, maybe that what things are overwritten in a pre-process or in a build process, and then things can be stripped out again. But still, it feels somehow wrong, like always overwriting stuff. I just like when things are just great the way they are, but with a minimal code base. And that's why I pursued this topic of coding things more efficiently, kind of, by trying to create a solid base style, what I consider to be something like a reset style sheet in combination with minimal styles for the website as a starting point, so that I don't have to start from entirely scratch and overwrite or reset all the browser style sheets, but I have a minimal starting base for that I will likely need for every project. And everything else beyond the global elements like font, all kinds of typography, sizes, colors, buttons, form elements, and so on, all the other stuff, I want to have rather within components, within bundled components. And I think that's my answer still. What I think, what's the best way to code custom designs, to modify things at the core level and to have simple to use templates, component templates that give me a head start, but don't require me to overwrite anything, but to modify at core level.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we can also go into more details about like different solutions that are out there and so on. But actually, my question was a bit different. My question was, what are the challenges? Not what is the solution, but what are the challenges? Because for me, like CSS, so hard? I mean, there are two things, right? Or there are multiple things about CSS, but usually you can kind of maybe divide CSS into like big chunks. One is when it comes to like layout, positioning of things. So also a lot of that is like for me page layout, like how things are like displayed on the page. And the second one is like design, right? Because once you have things in the place where they should be, then you need to style them according to the designs and make them pretty, kind of. So, and I don't know. I mean, currently, so still, like, what are the challenges? Because currently we have this approach of a base style and then stuff inside of the components, right? You override or you make the whole like styling part, or as you said, you have a base style that resets things and that implements the overall CI or the general CI of a website, and then you in the components you do all like the specific stuff for this component, and still people are struggling with that in like spending a lot of the time or like most of the time while coding on this.
Yeah, or is it struggling? Is it just like investing time? It just needs time, right? I wouldn't say like struggling really. It's more like it takes time to do that because you're crafting things by hand. But yeah, you could ask that of a lot of things, right? Why does it take so much time to code a custom login and user management? Well, yeah, because you need to write it and it's time. It takes time. And it's like with building houses. If you're building a brick by brick, it certainly takes more time than when using pre-built elements and just like have walls that you need to put together. Or when deciding on a given house and making modifications only to that. And all of these like come with advantages, but also with drawbacks. So the challenges, I think, with CSS, writing good CSS, is that the lines aren't always that clear. You said, yeah, there's the representation in terms of layout, and then there's what you call design. But these things are many times somehow also, or can be interlinked.
Mm.
Like, what is padding inside of an element? Is that design or precision? It's kind of both. It determines like the ratio between elements and the sizing, but also has direct impact on its behavior, on its positioning, and so on. And I think, or I would hope that like something like container queries help being more modular in the future also with that, because in an ideal world, when you have very modular structure in your CSS or in your design system, basically a modular design system, then you should be able to make quick adjustments and build new things more quickly. I just have never been a big fan of the atomic design principles for coding custom websites, because building an atomic design principle with like where you have multiple what is it, like multiple
Atoms.
levels, kind of, yeah, you have atoms, the smallest elements, you have then multiple atoms built a molecule, then an organism, and then a template, and then a page. These are all interlinked, but also they depend on each other, and that's so hard. Like maintaining such thing this can be very hard. Building the first draft probably could be very quick, and then building on top of that. But then you want to change that one button, or your customer asks you to change that one button style on that one page. And suddenly it's not just that one button, it's a general decision. Are we going to change it everywhere or just here? And in an ideal world, the answer, you make that choice and say, yeah, okay, sure, we make it change everywhere or we leave it like that. But we're not living in ideal worlds, and you gotta make compromises sometimes. Then it's great when you can rather easily break out of the rules without having to, without doing too much to it. And I feel that's where I like things to break up at some point, and things being unique. But this at the same time kind of comes with a drawback that whatever, like all these unique pieces, these components, you have still, you have to code them more custom as well. You have more freedom, but yeah, you also have to put in a bit more work.
Yeah, two paths we can go down now. One is like you like what you mentioned is kind of also a lot behind the idea of Tailwind, right? Where Tailwind takes it to a really extreme approach that you like don't like that you basically define your styles on a instance basis, and almost all of them, right? So there is something called a pre-flight in Tailwind, but this is not really used. So there is no base style kind of in Tailwind, and you only use utility classes for everything. And like this is the one extreme, and then you have like coding everything as a component, and then just applying classes for these components. And yeah, and then there's something in the middle like Cube CSS, where it combines like this layout primitives with or like composition primitives with utility classes, and then like exceptions and so on. But this is the basic idea. So yeah, I think this is often, I think that we are moving somewhat in this direction, that if you just want to build a quick prototype, right? And if you don't care that much about design, then yes, take a component framework where everything is predefined, where you say, okay, I don't need to break out because I don't really care, or I just want to like implement something quickly. And then, however, if everything needs to be custom, you need to do it like yourself and really write it. And I think this is like the second part. I think CSS, while it's always, at least in circles of maybe backend developers or like developers from other language, it's always seen as like not a real programming language and so on. But the complexity of CSS is actually quite big, like enormous, right?
I don't really like this topic in terms of it's not real programming. Yeah, but I don't care if you consider it programming or not. It's a complex thing that you need to do, right? It's a skill set, and it's a very different skill set. And people who are, I'd say, like more like on the side of backend development and in-depth data, and say look down on front-end developers, I think they really shouldn't. That more shows that you don't know enough to understand the complexities and don't value enough how to do that really well. But at the same time, I think it has a lot also to do with how we design interfaces these days, or how interfaces were designed over the course of time. There was a time, early 2000s, where every website was responsive out of the box because you used tables, right? And we had no mobile devices, but like still everything was kind of responsive. And we then came into a time where everything was very much designed like a flyer, like like print stuff, right? And it was very flashy, and you had these 3D type of real, what's it called? The design
something.
Neomorphic.
Yeah. Is it neomorphism? I don't know. I'm not a designer. Let me
Google that. Neomorphism. I think yes. What is neomorphism? Hey ChatGPT, what is neomorphism? It only gives me German Wikipedia pages. No, there's English. Neomorphism is a design style used in graphical user interfaces. It is commonly identified by a soft and light look. Okay. No. And it is sometimes considered a medium between skeuomorphism and flat design. So skeuomorphism, that's this thing where things are trying to look like more like physical things, right? The time when we had interfaces where you wanted the button to look like as if it was like a photo of a button and a real button, and have these shadows and lights. And things were so much more complicated back then because we didn't even have the technology to do this with CSS. But you had to use sprite sheets and pictures and so on. And now with things being more flat in design, and being designed more in terms of in regards to true responsive mobile first designs, I feel also it can become where it becomes a bit easier to actually code well designs. The bigger challenges is with the technology stuff in the background, with making sure it's fluid, making sure that when coding HTML stuff with images, that they are also optimized, and doing micro animations and stuff like that. But I feel like it's a good thing that we're thinking more about UX, about user experience, about accessibility these days when creating great websites, and more about the context and the content than just about making it look flashy. And with that, hopefully, we will have to spend somehow less time coding just like custom CSS that then gets weird and quirky at some point. One more thing that came to my mind is also what I really didn't like about Bootstrap was having all these breakpoints, because sometimes you don't need it. You didn't need a breakpoint at a certain point, but still there was a breakpoint. And things changed and adapted and wasn't fluid. Well, depends how you configured it. And sometimes you don't need that. I consider a great design one that feels organic and fluid from mobile to desktop, and where you try to code as much as possible. The other way around. Where you try to code as less as possible, writing few lines of CSS. And for me, CSS is more a definition, it's more a rule set, creating the boundaries, and not kind of telling it very strictly what it has to do at which point and so on. And that's more what I see more often when I look at CSS or an implementation of interface that has challenges. Then most of the times there's a lot of CSS written. And the first thing I do is I try to delete as much as possible. And many times I can delete at least 30% of the code as I'd written without changing anything in appearance, but fixing bugs. And that's more the complexity side of things, because people built or wrote that CSS for a reason. It's just that it has been a challenge to come up with a simpler approach.
Yes. So great talk. We can link in the notes from Andy Bell. Be the browser's mentor, not its micromanager, or something in the veins of that, right? So yes, I totally agree with you. And I have seen so many projects where there was for a single component, more than 200 lines of CSS or 500 lines of CSS or SCSS even, right? With nesting. So that makes it even more normal CSS kind of. And this is also where, like for me, not being a CSS expert and also not claiming to be one, for me, it's like debugging CSS issues is like totally, as you said, you always go in and delete as much as you can. I don't have the confidence to do that, right? And I think maybe it feels a lot like that for many developers, that you keep on adding stuff and layering on top and layering on top. And that is like usually the path to I don't know, not success, at least. And for me also, I'm right. The combination between markup and styling is something very crucial. Where in the past, and this has improved a lot, right? Because in the past you needed to have a lot of like extra elements to style things in a certain way, and now with like Flexbox, Grid, and like even some other things, it's you can write purely semantic HTML or purely minimal HTML and then style it in any way that you want, right? And this to me is also like the goal. And I always like try to be, okay, first write minimal HTML and then see how you can achieve all of that. And then usually that's where then problems begin, when somebody says, yeah, but I need here this extra wrapper, or I need this, and now I need that. And now I need here another element because I need a pseudo element, and then I need this and that and here. And then you like it goes on and on and on, right? So is the only way to improve that by teaching people how CSS works better, or how I don't know.
Yeah, I think the question then is a bit, what makes a great front developer, or what is the skill set you should bring or focus on improving as a front-end developer? And to some extent, it can be a weird mixture of, ideally, I think, you're a creative person, you're a design person yourself, and a very logical thinker at the same time.
Yeah.
Someone that likes really coming up with rules and... Yeah, and to some extent it is. Like, I don't think like you need to be a math person, but someone who likes to think in rules and solve problems and so on. And at the same time, you're very visual, because if you're like mostly a very visual person and you don't have that logical thinking, then I think you might end up with writing a lot of CSS that is more complicated, more complex. Whereas, well, also the other way around, if you're like have less of a feeling for design, let's say, and more like a logical thinker, I think you rather tend to come up with clever ways to fix a problem. But once you get feedback from a designer or from a client, it will be more hard for you to make decisions in terms of, okay, I'm not just going to do what you exactly tell me. Like you told me, oh, can you please like increase the padding here for 2 pixels between that breakpoint and that breakpoint? And then not doing that, but instead answering with, or implementing it that, okay, I just find a new general rule. And by the way, this also allows me to save 3 other things, right? Or you will always add code on top and on top and top. And that's kind of the challenge. Didn't you tell me that Andy Bell also said something like, He considers it the only true way or the best way to create designs when coders and designers work together.
Maybe.
Was that?
I don't remember.
Okay, I think I hope this is correct. If not, well, whatever. It's not. I just found that very interesting, also because I think that's I can understand that. It just like in the way we're building websites for clients, it's not like that many ways. Again, it's like I think it would be the ideal way if you have a great designer who's a great front-end developer doing all that stuff, him
Oh,
herself.
now I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah. But that's just the ideal way and not always the reality.
Yeah.
And
a lot of the times
everyone else is not allowed to be a coder, front-end coder. No, of course not. You got to compromise at some point.
Yeah. No, I think like a lot of the times we get designs that are already finished, right? And maybe even a company only looks for someone to implement their designs when they have them, when they are finished, because they do the design in-house or something like that, right? And in that case, it's not possible to start like early on discussing a feedback or giving feedback and discussing ideas. Yeah. But I think like one point you touched on there is like also one of the, you actually see if you are a good front-end developer when change requests come in, right? Because how fast can you adjust your designs? And I think, honestly, like Tailwind is providing some really, like in this situation, some really, or a huge benefit for a lot of people, because it takes away this thinking about general solutions. And this is usually where problems come in, as you said, right? You try to find general solutions for everything. So I'm a big fan of this cube CSS methodology where you do have like these primitives and this is a minimal set of rules that you can apply to certain elements and then work with utility classes to get you most of the rest, right? But
I feel like like it's nothing like I'm not against Tailwind or something. I'm just like, it feels like sometimes when people talk to me about it, it's like, it looks like this solves all your problems. And then I look at a couple of Tailwind build websites. It's like, okay, great, they're broken. Hey, they also have issues. It's not like you can't program bad looking websites or websites with many with weird breakpoints or issues. It's another tool. It's another tool with a lot of great features and advantages. But still, the core challenge of writing something simple, coming up with simple approaches, to some extent, it remains. But probably just in a different way and probably in a better way. I think the main reason for me just not touching too much on Tailwind or not trying to bring that to Flint is because it is another tool. It is another very opinionated tool, and I didn't feel like saying, okay, Tailwind is this thing. We're going to do everything with Tailwind. Sometimes it's great to being able to choose your tools of trade for a job. And I don't feel like saying everyone has to do it that way, and that's the best way.
Yeah,
and that's also why we moved Bootstrap at some point.
Yeah. I by no means do I want to introduce something like that or anything, but I think like just the idea of utility classes together with like these primitives is like a really good one. And I think what Tailwind achieved, sort of, what most other frameworks, I call it framework now, although it's like not really a framework, have not achieved, is that Tailwind is so close to CSS that by learning Tailwind, you also have to learn CSS kind of. And while there is now no like really good, I think like a glossary or like how to for every CSS property. I mean, yes, there are these sites MDN and like whatnot where you can read a lot. I think Tailwind, when you search for certain classes, you get a really good overview about what you can do with it or how to use it, right? And these classes entanglement are usually just like one CSS property, maybe also a custom property that gets a certain value or it uses custom properties and then so on. But this is maybe one reason why it has also become so popular.
A lot is like, I think they provide great documentation, right? And a lot of that is very close to actual CSS. All these utility classes like flex wrap, overflow, hidden, relative. It is kind of like CSS. Or almost literal CSS at some points. I still remember when I started developing websites, my biggest issue with coding custom designs was knowing if what I did was the right way to do. I felt kind of like insecure of, okay, is this how you're supposed to do it? Is this how professionals do it? Will this be like have issues in the end? And so building up the confidence that what I'm doing makes sense and will work. Or if there's anything I don't see. So mentorship is also something that can help a lot there, and reviewing other people's code and looking at code and so on. With simple examples like when you're using float and you float elements and you have overflow issues or something like that, or using when and how to use flexbox versus grid, or like positioning elements. Absolutely right. There are ways how you can do things kind of the wrong way. Like if you would try to code a whole website just with position absolute on all the elements, well, that's probably gonna give you or put you in trouble, at least for most use cases. But everything else is kind of okay and allowed. There's many times not a right or wrong. There's just like a more convenient way, a more flexible way of doing things. And that's what I'm always looking for. What's the best, the easiest way that is still easy to maintain, to write custom designs, to code custom designs, And last but not least, I don't feel it's always bad to receive designs that have been created without developer. We have great design partners who create great designs that are great to implement. And then they're also fine with us making compromise or adjusting things, but it's a process then. I think I never consider a design to be 100% perfect. I always take it as a very close representation of what the end result should look like, but not as a literal one. And that's also where you need to build up the confidence over time that it's not about making it pixel perfect, but to craft something that resembles what the designer was trying to achieve with their design.
That's a good Schlusswort.
That's a good Schlusswort.